Welcome to Corwin's Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast with hosts Peter DeWitt and Michael Nelson. This podcast is from education leaders for education leaders. Every week, Peter, Mike, and our guests get together to share ideas, put research into practice, and ensure that every student is learning not by chance, but by design.
Michael Nelson.
Oh, Peter DeWitt, I am so over the top excited for our interview.
Okay, so this is the thing that I want to warn the audience of. Yes, if you listen to this podcast, awesome. If you listen to this particular interview, that's really great. But you're going to want to go back and watch it on YouTube too. And we haven't said that. I've never said that about any interview that we've done for the podcast yet, but we're interviewing Loren Long. And for those of you that don't know Loren Long, I have to admit I'm geeking out because I don't usually get starstruck, and I was. And I mean that honestly, because I have two of Loren Long's prints in my office. I bought them when I became principal. I have his picture books. You have his picture books. He has illustrated books for Barack Obama, Amanda Gorman, Madonna, Matt de la Pena. Like, there's just so many, but he's also written illustrated books on his own. And the new book that he has out now is called The Yellow Bus, and it is a beautiful story. But people will probably think, and Mike, I'm just kind of anticipating, because people are going to think, okay, so you're interviewing an illustrator and author for the Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast. Absolutely. And why? Because literature should be at the center of everything that we do. And I will always be that first grade teacher that sat on the floor with my students, finding picture books that were representative, positive representations of who they are, so they could see themselves in the books. And that is who Loren Long is. And we talked to him about illustrating. We talked to him about writing. We talked to him about, is there a social change that's a piece in there? But I need to stop rambling, and you need to help me.
I'm going to help you here, Peter. I'm going to help you. I promise. Here's what I believe. As leaders, you need to know your why. So as you're listening to this podcast, over and over and over again, Loren talks about his why to a bigger audience. He has worldwide audience, Peter, and he discusses his why. And that grounds him in his work as an author and an illustrator of picture books. Know your why, Peter.
Yes. And also the whole idea of like finding inspiration. We know that anxiety is high. We know that sometimes we get tired during the school year and all those kind of things. And honestly, we both would pick up a picture book and find inspiration. There have been times in my own office, in my daily life, that I'm not feeling 100%, or maybe I'm feeling a little bit down. I have picture books. I know you have them all over your house. Picture books that I'll just pull out, and they just bring joy. So, and Loren is one of the ones that bring me the biggest joy when I'm reading his picture book. So finding inspiration is something he talks about here. And as a leader, as a teacher, where are you finding inspiration? And I think that's a connection that I made as well. But I am very excited for everybody to hear. We told Loren that it was only going to be a half an hour, and I ended up going for 45 minutes. I'm not going to apologize, because I'm just very happy with the fact that we interviewed Loren Long. But I hope that all of you enjoy the podcast interview as much as we did.
Picture yourself popularly known among staff members as the reliable go-to person who makes meaningful change happen. This is possible when you equip yourself with robust strategies and tools from Corwin's leadership workshops. Sign up today at corwin.com.
Loren Long, welcome to the Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast.
Thank you very much, Peter. Mike, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
I just have to geek out for just a few minutes, and I know Mike's going to as well. So I'm sorry if we're going to embarrass you, but I have two of your original prints in my office. I bought them in 2006 when I became a school principal. One is actually from this book, and the other one is from Mr. Peabody's Apples, and they are still in my office. And and they were in my principal's office when I was a school principal, though. And picture books are something that Mike and I both use quite a bit. I mean, both as teachers, as school principals, as superintendents, but also in our work running workshops. And yours are among the best. So the fact that you're here is just kind of an overwhelming moment for me. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mike.
Mike saved me here.
Thank you. Thank you. I got to get your name straight. Sorry, I called Mike Peter, Mike.
That's all right. That's all right.
That's cool.
That's
that when I heard The Learned Astronomer, that was one of my third-ish picture books ever, back in, I think, published in about 2004. So and it's so cool because I have learned that high school and even college writing classes use, that's a famous Walt Whitman from his Leaves of Grass poem that we made into a picture book. So thank you, Peter.
Well, it's fantastic to see you on screen. Thank you so much for joining us on Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast. I'm going to jump into one of your books, and the reason I'm jumping into this one, Loren, is last night on Instagram, I'm kind of scrolling, watching the Olympics and all of those kinds of things that probably many individuals across the world are doing. And a neighboring school district was having a leadership team retreat at her home. And she was using Little Tree. And I was like, no way. And I make comments to say, oh, that's a great book. I've used it a ton when I'm conducting retreats and things. And she said, oh, yeah, this is how we're using it and how we're building culture and, being receptive to change. You just need to know, I have used Little Tree. Peter knows I've used Little Tree in several different professional learning experiences across the United States, and people gravitate to it. We use picture books with adults because it makes the point for us that sometimes a difficult and emotional point that people can receive through the use of a simple picture book, and that's the willingness to change is really some of the theme behind Little Tree. But give us your take on Little Tree.
Oh gosh, thank you so much, Mike. I wrote Little Tree. It's one of the books I'm very proud of in my career. As you all know, I write some of the picture books that I've illustrated, and also illustrated many other writers' works. Little Tree is one of my own, and it came about because my oldest son, who's now a grown adult and out of the house, was in high school early on, probably a sophomore or junior. And as a father, I was like, wait a second, he's starting to talk about college, and well, what does that mean in my particular life? And whoa, that means he's going to move out of the house, and for the first time in 18 years. And I looked at him, and all I could see was his first day of kindergarten, and how he cried when we said goodbye, and he had to file into the school with this strange building, this strange woman who was his teacher, and these strange other kids that he really didn't know yet. And it had such a gripping memory on me because the principal had just said to the parents, please find your teacher, get in line so we can start our school year off. And my son was that one that I took a photo, and the minute I took the photo, he came running. When their line went into the building, he came running, and he grabbed onto my knee. Now, this is not unique to me, right? You all have seen this. He grabs onto my knee and starts crying, and Dad, don't leave me. And I, of course, was thinking, okay, well, we gave it a good shot. We'll come home. We'll go to my studio. We'll have cookies, and you can try this again next year. But of course I couldn't do that, right? I had to let him go. He was ready. He needed to face the cold feeling of winter,
Winter, yeah.
which is change. And so that got me thinking. So I took out a notebook much like this and just wrote this little story about it. So as a writer, yeah, I was just asking myself, well, I feel like a tree that won't let go of its leaves. And what would happen if I didn't let go of my leaves? Well, my leaves would shrivel up and turn gray and brown, and I would uh, have them all winter maybe, but the next spring, all the other trees would be a little bit taller and their leaves would be bright and green because they allowed themselves to die for the winter. So they allowed themselves to feel the harsh cold of winter without their leaves protecting them. So I was just thinking along that, and I looked at it as a little self-help fable. Um, and okay, well, finally, all the other trees are really tall, and no longer can the little tree hear the mourning dove and feel the sunshine. And he realizes I have to let go. And once he does, change happens and he grows. That's a longer description
No,
than you probably asked for, Mike.
no, it's exactly what I needed to hear. It's Peter and I just wrote a book that you'll see the picture on the wall, Leading with Intention, and part of the workshops that we do, we spend 5 to 8 minutes talking about the reason why we wrote the book and what's the thing, what's behind the authors and their writing of the book resonates with the audience, and what you just shared will resonate with people. It's we need to hear the reason. We just need to share with you we're using it for that reason and so much more, and it's changing systems and cultures within schools in which we're using that book, Loren.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing that story. Little Tree is a favorite among many, and I know several of the people I talked to said, ask him about it, ask him about Little Tree. It's got to be one of the first questions. So Peter, thanks for letting me jump out with Little
You're
Tree.
very welcome.
Thank you,
Lauren,
Mike.
you had said earlier that you had illustrated for lots of people. I actually know Phil Bildner, so I've known Phil for many years, and
Oh, awesome.
but you've written a book with Barack Obama and Amanda Gorman and so many. But now you have a new book out that you actually wrote and illustrated yourself, which is The Yellow Bus, and it is beautiful. And one of the reasons why we know, and your story just illustrated that so well, no pun intended, but there is a deeper meaning behind there's a deeper meaning behind the books that you write and illustrate. And The Yellow Bus is such a beautifully written book, but it's also beautiful to look at. But it starts off with this, this brand new yellow school bus that is just energizing, and the kids are on, and then it goes through the story of how it gets abandoned and maybe repurposed. What made you think? I know that within the story, not to give away, because I don't want to give away any part of it, but I know there was inspiration behind it. Can you talk a little bit about the inspiration behind it and the deeper meaning that you take away from the book?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yellow.
We can all hold ours up.
Wait.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that in some ways this is a very organic conversation. I appreciate you all because the little tree is kind of a personal, unique book to my life at the time, and so is the Yellow Bus. And I probably should just start by telling the listeners how the book came about from its beginning, and it was 4 years ago. And that would have put us in the spring/early summer of 2020, and which brought so much change to everyone. One of the changes, my wife and I, we moved my father-in-law into the home for about the better part of 10 months because he was fragile and had some he was alone, and that was a very pleasant change. But the other thing we did was we adopted one of these pandemic rescue dogs, and it was a ended up being kind of a crazy hound dog. And his name was Charlie. He was about 4 years old. He became my instant studio friend. He's not in my studio now, but if you look right behind me, there's a corner, and I have a little ottoman set up where Charlie spends a lot of his time because he can look out over his domain, which is essentially my driveway. But so, and if he was in here now and somebody pulled up, it would, bombs would go off. But because he's a hound dog. So, but he became the great studio mate. I mean, we were instant best friends. Toward the afternoon, during that whole pandemic year, I had 2 books to work on. I had Someone Builds a Dream, which I really think is an important text that Lisa Wheeler from Michigan wrote that I illustrated. And then I had Amanda Gorman's book, Change Sings. And this was before, by the way, the inauguration, where she became world known. So I had plenty of work to do. So I spent a lot of time in this very space and this desk here working on those 2 books. And every day, Charlie needed a little break, and he needed to run off some energy. So I took up running, and I wasn't a runner until then. So every day I would take Charlie running on a bike trail near the house and through the woods here in Southwest Ohio, Cincinnati area. We saw this abandoned school bus, and it was rusted, old, abandoned, sitting in a paddock surrounded by goats, sinking in the mud. And I passed the bus daily for a better part of a year, just kind of pondering, that's curious. How'd that bus get there? Why is the bus there? So that's kind of like just, there's wonder all around us if we only keep our ears and eyes open for it. But at first it was just a curious thing. Then it became a little bit of a muse. I'm thinking, why is the bus there? There could be a story there. And then one day, I'll never forget, I'm running along. I'm thinking, surely that bus started out on top of the literal hill, literal and figuratively, shiny and bright and serving her purpose, what she was created to do, at the top of her game, carrying the most precious cargo from one important place to another and home again. And how did she end up sinking in mud, rusted out, surrounded by livestock? Yet, as I ran by, somehow she looked happy to me. So when I came across that, I thought, okay, this is not just maybe a cute story about a yellow school bus. This could be a little bit deeper exploration of the passage of time and the purpose in life and the human feeling we get as humanoids when we actually do something for others. And then I went home and I started writing. And I like to show young and old how great of a writer I am. All those mistakes, right? It's terrible when you start, young people. It's terrible. It's terrible. So you can even see, I was going to call this book The Bright Yellow Bus. And all of these mistakes, but then here I've circled, I fell upon this thing. They filled her with joy. So I thought, I want to surprise this bus. I want to surprise me as a writer, and I want to maybe surprise my readers. If you look at this bus on the bookshelf at your local library or your school library or maybe a bookstore, you would never imagine maybe where this bus or this story goes. So I had the goats in my back pocket, right? Because that's what I saw. But I thought, okay, I've got to, and without giving away the story, I've got to see what happens to this particular school bus on the way from her bright and shiny on the top of the hill job until she gets to lower places. And then how does she feel? So no matter who the bus has climbing aboard, or what, they fill her with joy. And I thought that was really an interesting theme and something worth exploring. And then I tried to dream up the lowest place that the bus could end up, yet she's still filled with joy. I think I talked around that enough.
No, I just, one of the things you made me think of is just that because, around here, I live in upstate New York. Mike lives in Washington State, and we'll start school in September. And as a principal, the night before the first day of school was like Christmas. It was just, it really was. It was just so exciting. Like the kids were coming. And the yellow school bus is the symbol of that. And so when I see, when I first, because I was watching on Instagram as you were posting some pictures, and it just, to me, it symbolized a lot of joy in general. Because when I think about the school bus, I think about all that it represents with bringing kids in, the learning that goes along, the just the connection to something you're going to remember for the rest of your life. We always, for those of us that rode a school bus to school every day, we remembered our bus drivers. It just, there's also that important piece that's happening too. And so the symbolic part of the school bus is fantastic.
And Peter, I appreciate that. I've often thought, well, what if that was just an old broken down car or a truck? And so that's the serendipitous part of life. It was a school bus, but yet maybe I wouldn't have been so attached to it for the very thing you're saying, because the yellow school bus is an iconic symbol of our American childhood and many other countries across the world. But it's just something, it represents childhood, but it also is a symbol of society. Because if you didn't ride a school bus, I didn't ride a school bus in elementary school because we could walk to our school or ride our bikes. But junior high school, I got to ride a school bus. And I'll never forget, like you said, one particular bus driver I'll never forget. And I was a school patrol kid, patrol officer in elementary school. So even though I didn't ride the bus, I got to go out and wear a little badge and make sure traffic was going this way and that. And so it was a big part of childhood. And so I do think that's one of the reasons the story was set up to resonate, if it is resonating.
Oh, I think it is.
Definitely. I hear lots of schools using the thought of using it symbolically with the bus being students, and students are in different phases throughout, let's say, a pre through 12 system, and they're in a middle school environment is much different than a kindergarten environment. And are we engaging in such a way that we're filling them with joy and having, in the students piece? So lots of takes on this one, Loren. So thank you for sharing behind the scenes again for the yellow bus. The piece that, if we shift the conversation, you mentioned that you also illustrate books from different authors, and would love to get a little bit behind the scenes in your thinking. I Change Sings is so, and if you were in our home right now and you were in our main floor bathroom, which is our guest bathroom, the bathroom that when guests come, that's the bathroom that they use. It changes, the picture books in that bathroom change probably every 2 to 3
Oh, and
weeks.
this is a true story, Loren. I've stayed at his house many times.
I love this.
And so picture books change, but I have to tell you, a consistent one for the past couple of years has been Change Sings, and people come out holding. Oh, sorry about that. People, I got so excited. People come out holding it, and like, tell me about this. And it was just this huge success. And I would love to know. And of course, Amanda Gorman has now a name that everybody knows. So you must have received the text, obviously, and then you began to look through I'm curious a couple things. Logistically, are the page breaks done, or do you help choose the page breaks to know how you illustrate? Because like the page that I'm on, I
Mhm.
also walk with our differences to show we are the same. I'm a movement that roars and springs. There's a wave where my change sings, and it's just this beautiful
Yeah.
image. And
Mhm.
uh,
Yeah.
how do you do that?
Well, thank you. I think, first of all, Mike, usually when I get a manuscript, the text isn't broken up. And I can't remember specifically if they had done that with Amanda Gorman's text, her lyrical poem, Change
Mhm.
Sings. So it does show up in, email, like a PDF or something, a form, and I print it out and then I sit with it. Um, I like to show things because it's so visual. I don't happen to have that text, or even maybe I do. These are some of the stories I've written, by the way, and many of them have not been published, or so like this is, for example, a story that I've written myself, and I won't divulge it, but it's just like this words, right? So as the illustrator, I know that a picture book is generally 32 pages or 40 pages, but in general, it's around 17 to 18 spreads, sometimes 16. So just as a matter of basics, I know that I have to divide this text up in some way, 16 times, 17 times. Um, as an illustrator, I'd like to have way more pages. Oftentimes, one of the hardest things is condensing and telling the story. So I like to think of myself as a filmmaker. When I'm looking at this, it's like a screenplay. So I get to be the director. I get to be the Steven Spielberg of this particular picture book. And it's not one of these yet. It's this. It's scary. It's very scary. So I just take my pencil, and before I draw anything, usually, I just jot notes of visual ideas. Oh, that could be a little girl with a guitar. Could you read the first line of Change Sings, Mike? I'll explain to you. First of all, there's a big difference in my book like Otis the Tractor that I've
Mhm.
written. That's a narrative story. It's a very character-driven story. Now, this book, like Amanda Gorman's Change Sings, is a poem. It's poetry. It's big, grand words, and it's almost a harder illustration assignment than drawing a character, drawing a setting, and then drawing what happens, a beginning, middle, end, and telling that story. That's where the page breaks are so important. So I can zoom in, for effect on a character like Otis the tractor, really close up, or go overhead if I'm telling a story. So I am thinking cinematically. So for this one, if you read the first line for me, Mike, I'll explain my thinking since I don't have my sketches and everything on hand for this book.
So
But
I can hear change humming in its loudest, proudest song. I don't fear change coming, and so I sing along.
okay. So I'm reading that. It looks like this. Remember, scary. And if you give those words to your students, everyone may come up with a very different thing. Now, if you don't mind, Mike, could you read the last line of that book?
And I've never done that with students. I'm thinking, I just need to read a line and have them do the illustration.
I'm actually just thinking how unbearable Mike is going to be when we're in Canada next week, we're in Australia in a couple of weeks, because he's just going to constantly say to me, I read the Loren Long. Loren Long asked me.
I love it. Okay, so
We
read
all
that
hear
one for me.
change strumming. Won't you sing along?
Okay, so I have the luxury of reading that maybe 10 times, 20 times. I could read it 100 times. if I want, before I start having to come up with, like this crazy task of the scary part of doing one drawing, right? So I had a musical theme, right? Going in just inherently. The title is Change Sings. She talks about humming in the first thing, and then at the end, she closes her poem with strumming. So in my mind, I thought humming, that's not loud necessarily. Let's start this quietly. I could see a little girl who represents Amanda Gorman, or a little girl that could look like Amanda, sitting with a big guitar just by herself. And we're starting this slow. We're starting this this poem, which becomes a picture book, slow. And then if you turn the page, Mike, and read the next.
That's I scream with the skies of red and blue streamers. I dream with the cries of tried and true dreamers.
Now, remember everyone, it looks like this. I'm still afraid. I'm still nervous because I could fail, right? So, but I just thought, okay, we got this quiet little girl with a big guitar, and you turn the page and immediately you're right into loud. You've got a word like scream, and then you've got a word like dream, and then you've got a phrase like tried and true dreamers. So again, give this text to different people, different times, different places, different backgrounds. They may think different things, but all we do is draw. All we have is our own brain, right? The thing between our ears. So I landed on dreamers. So I immediately thought of Martin Luther King Jr. in his famous speech, "I have a dream." And I thought loud, a big mural. So that little girl on the front is now standing, looking up at this massive mural of MLK, and exactly. And she's small, she's diminutive, and she's looking up at what the world can be, and all these big words and words of meaning that Amanda has in her poem. And so again, this is me thinking, this could be a good idea. I don't know if it's a good idea or not. I'm going to try. And then I thought, okay. And then it seems like Amanda's character, I keep calling her Amanda's character, but in her poem, the protagonist, or the leader of the book, she meets other people, and she becomes, in a way, a bit of a Pied Piper on this change singing caravan that I hope, and I imagine Amanda herself kind of was trying to say, we have agency in our life, even young people, and we can't solve the world's problems, but we can do a little bit in our own space. So Amanda was wonderful. I'd never heard of her. When my literary agent, after she started becoming, she first was the inaugural youth poet laureate of the country, and she was already becoming an incredibly, she was killing up the world with her poetry and her presence and her personality. And she was still in Harvard, from what I understand. And I remember the call. I'd never heard of her. I was thinking, oh, should I have heard of her? And Steve, my agent, said, well, not really, but she is doing this, and this. She's been on, some television shows, and we had no idea about the inauguration poem, and that I have a story about that, but I don't know how much time we want to continue to go on. I'm happy to talk forever. You're asking me to talk about my life's work, and that's always easy to do. And I'm kind of enthusiastic about it, if you can't tell.
No, I was going to say we have a good 4 hours, so whenever
Yeah. I got plenty of water here, so I'm good.
Yeah, we'd love to hear more.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. So, so I understood that I had published with Penguin, my Penguin Random House. The President Obama's book was with Knopf, which was part of Random House, and then that was before Random House and Penguin merged as Penguin Random House. And I had done most of my Otis books. Little Tree was with a imprint called Philomel, which is an awesome imprint under the Penguin umbrella. And then I went and did a book called Love with Matt De La Pena, with Putnam. I did the Someone Builds a Dream with Viking, and I did another book with, or no, Dial, and then Change Things with Viking. And that editor had Amanda's Change Things manuscript, and for various reasons they pitched it to me, and I was on board because I felt like there was a lot of potential. And then so I start then understanding who Amanda is and this amazing potential and future that she has. And we had just very little contact throughout the creation of the book, which isn't out of the ordinary at all. Oftentimes if you have a story, you sell it to a publisher, and then they go find the art or the illustrator, and sometimes the two don't know each other, and oftentimes they don't communicate. I'm to a point now where I do like to communicate with an author, just because I like to pick their brain. I don't really want them to influence my approach to the text as an illustrator and as visual all that much, but I sometimes like to know where that idea came from, or so I didn't really have that communication with Amanda, but I worked with the editor and the art director. They were great, and worked on the book dummy and was working on the art, and it was going to be a fall 21 publication. And that was, what was it, January, that was the President Biden Harris inauguration. And about the week before, and I think the inauguration was either on a Tuesday night or a Wednesday night, but the Thursday before, the editor called and said, "Hey, Loren, how are you doing? How's the work going?" I said, "Well, I have like 3 paintings left. In a perfect world, I'd have a month to finish those paintings. I'm still working traditionally with things like paintbrushes and pencils and charcoal and all that stuff." So acrylic paint was Amanda Gorman's book, colored pencils some. So I'm working traditionally, and I said, "I'd love to have about a month. I've still got a cover to do." She said, "Have you thought about the cover?" I said, "I have some ideas. I like to do the cover last because I like to see the whole book around me, and then let ideas for the cover develop over time." So long story short, she said, "Okay, we have some news. It's still kind of hush hush, but Amanda has been chosen to be the Biden inauguration poet." And I thought, my first thing is, I was like Maya Angelou, an inauguration poet.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's so great. I'm so excited for her." And because by then I already felt friendly with Amanda. Like I felt, like we were a team, even though we hadn't actually worked together directly. But we're going to share this book together. So I already had admiration and affection for her as a human. And so they said, "Stop what you're doing. Give us a sketch, if possible, by tomorrow, for the cover." And I said, "Okay, I can do that." I said, "Why?" And they said, "Because after she gives this inauguration speech, the world is going to know who she is, and we want her book, your cover, to be seen when people Google her."
Yeah.
And this is all out in the open. There's no behind the scenes that is secret or anything. But it was just such a great experience for me. So I already had the end of the book where she's essentially asking her reader, won't you sing along? And I thought, okay, that would be perfect. And I loved that mosaic pattern on the MLK. So I just basically took the figure and put it there, and then hand drew the change sings, hand painted it, took a photo. I think it took me Friday, Saturday, Sunday to do the painting you're showing there, and then took a photo of it. The art director designed in our names, and that's what you saw, the world saw after she gave her speech. And I was sitting here in my studio. I have a TV over there on the wall, and I'm watching the whole day of the inauguration unfold. I'm back to the paintings, thinking I got this deadline, and I remember President Biden spoke, and I thought, oh man, they must have cut the poem. And I didn't realize the poem went after the president spoke. And then she came on. I stood up, I put my paintbrushes down. I stood up in the middle of my studio, and I got chills listening to her speech, and a little tear came to my eye. And I don't know if I think I shared that moment with the rest of the world, but I also felt this connection to this person. I was so nervous for her. Almost like I I wouldn't say it like a fatherly, which is weird, but she's younger than my two boys. So I certainly I like to think of myself as maybe an uncle to, you know, as her uncle illustrator. But anyway, so
That's
that,
awesome.
that's my story about Amanda. She's
I
very
want
sweet.
I want to shift a little bit, because so that's an amazing story, and it makes me think on a very small scale. As a former, Mike and I are both former first grade teachers and taught in very diverse schools. And the very favorite thing that I love doing, and he loved doing, is starting your morning by reading picture books. And one of the things that I learned, because it was a very diverse school, and I came from a place that wasn't as diverse, where I grew up, is that what we want to always do is make sure that we have picture books that are representative and positive representations of the kids that are in the class. And your books do that. And the other thing that you do, that I'm sure you do, you must know this, is that you give us as educators the ability to talk about topics by using your book, right? And so when I'm thinking about Amanda Gorman, when I'm thinking about Barack Obama, when I'm thinking about the yellow bus, there is such an element of a social dynamic that I feel is weaving through the picture book. And you give us the opportunity to actually have these deep conversations where we know we're in a very polarized world, not just country, but world. And we're often trying to work with leaders to find ways to actually talk about topics in ways that are going to be more receptive to people. And your picture books do that. Has that always been a part of who you wanted to be when it came to illustrating books and writing books? You wanted to be able to take these very important topics that sometimes people feel are polarizing, and you want to put them into a way that are beautiful and require us to have a deeper conversation. Is that always been who you have been when it comes to illustration?
I don't think so. The honest answer, I think, Peter, is I had the gift of a very early experience when I illustrated a book called I Dream of Trains,
Mhm.
2003. Just so happened to be the same year, fall, that I illustrated a book called Mr. Peabody's Apples, written by
Mhm.
Madonna.
Mhm.
But I Dream of Trains was a book about a sharecropper's son, an African
Mhm.
American at the turn of the century, in like 1900, who
Mhm.
loved trains,
Mhm.
and they were working in the fields, and this little boy would dream of the places he could go on trains. It was a poetic reverie, and It was written by Angela Johnson, who is an African American MacArthur genius, wonderful writer. And so I had the pleasure and also the challenge of illustrating that. And at the time I was working, I'm basically a representational illustrator, meaning I draw fairly realistically, a little bit stylized. But at the time I was new, and I thought I need a model to do this character, this little boy, over and over throughout the story. And a little bit like you, Peter, my sons went to a small school, and there were only about 3 African American families in the school. And I approached one mother, and I had to convince, I had to pitch. I asked the principal first if I could do this, and then I he connected me with the mom, and I had to ask, can I use your son to be a model? I'll come over to your home. I'm going to put light on him. I've already got a sketch dummy with poses that I need, and you can be there. And I was feeling like this is really an imposition on this young family. And she said to me, "Oh my gosh, absolutely, absolutely. Come over whenever you need to." The little boy's name was Drake. "Please come over. I love that." And I said, "Oh, that's so sweet of you." And she said, "I'm always looking for." Now this is 2003, so we're just talking 20 years ago. "I'm always looking for picture books so that my children can see themselves in the book. So this will be another one. That's so great." And I remember then having that awakening of, okay, that's not something I've ever experienced. Reading to my 2 little boys who look a lot like me, I never thought of that. And it opened up just a whole new experience to me. And I'm very proud of my field of children's publishing that has taken strides in this last 20 years to correct that. I mean, there's always work to do, but it's so for me. I had this discussion with Matt De La Pena when we were touring for Love, and um, I'm like, I'm not really an activist, or but like he writes about heavy subjects, um, uh, and I'm like, I'm a picture book person. I'm not really an activist, or you know, I'm not trying to make political statements or anything like that with my work. And he said, "Loren, you are an activist. Um, you had a little boy in a wheelchair in Love, and I didn't say that anywhere in my text. You have a little girl with a scarf on her head, and I didn't say that in my text. And you had a little boy curled up under a piano, um, fearful of his fighting parents, and I never said that in my text." So I thought, that's a story not to pat myself on the back, but it's a story just to flat out say it's so easy to be inclusive. It's as an illustrator, if you just so now to circle back, Peter, now I am trying to lead with that. I am trying to in not a conspicuous way, but just a natural way. It's the right thing to do, because I'm not worried about the grown-ups out there in the world. I'm worried about that 3rd grader whose teacher might be reading that to them, and he sees it. Even in Someone Builds a Dream, where it's highlighting skilled labor in this world, somebody might see their dad in that book, or their uncle, or their neighbor, and that somebody might be a 1st grader. So those are the warm fuzzy things that I feel like, I'm proud of. I feel good about that. And the yellow bus, by the way, circling back to the yellow bus, that's a theme that has many layers. And as a creator, you don't want to tell someone what they're supposed to get out of the creation. You want them to do it. But one of the things I loved about it was, just like life, things happen to her that are out of her control, and she has no control over them. but she does have control over her outlook, her response,
How she
what
reacts.
makes her happy. Yeah. So
I think you said it all when you said it's easy to be inclusive. And honestly, there was just so many times that reading picture books, especially yours, those kids do notice themselves in the pictures.
I got a lot of response from Change Sings that we were talking about with Mike. The second child in there has a kippa hat.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's a decision, right?
Mhm.
That's not in Amanda's text. So that is a decision to be inclusive. And again, as in terms of my workload, it wasn't any big deal, but it was just the thought to be inclusive, So
Well, you mentioned earlier when we were talking about the yellow bus, the feeling you get when you do something for others, Loren. And I think Peter and I both have to tell you, you've done a lot for others. And
mm,
just to circle that theme, you bring a lot of joy to others. And so we are so incredibly grateful that you joined us today on the Leaders Coaching Leaders podcast. Thank you so much.
I appreciate it so much. And those words will stay with me when I'm back here grinding it out and stressed about my next book or my next painting. Mike and Peter all remember this, and the warmth and that feeling, and it means a lot to me. And the two of you were in the trenches for years. I know you're working in different trenches now, but I would like to say to all the teachers out there that are actually in the trenches, the energy it takes is incredible, and I do believe they're doing the most important work. And it's very gratifying for me to know that a book like this might be in one of those educators' hands this coming fall. So thank you both.
Well, thank you for being on our podcast. This was a huge highlight for both of us. And I want to apologize for lying to you, because I said before we started recording that it would only be a half an hour of your time. And we kind of blew that out of the water. So I hope you don't mind. But thank you so much,
No,
Loren.
no, absolutely. And keep doing the good work, the
All
two
right.
of you. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having me.
Thank you.
I have to tell you, I just had a moment that I don't think I will forget ever in my life. I don't think I've ever read a story back to the author who wrote it, or,
I knew that was going to come up.
illustrated it. It's like, oh, I need to not stumble over my words. I need to really just calmly read this. And if you're watching this podcast, you'll see that I'm holding the book up just like I was a teacher. I had to hold my other wrist because I think my whole body was shaking. So yeah, I was pretty excited for this interview, Peter. And I have to tell you, listening to it through the leadership lens and who he is and how he thoughtfully takes information and communicates it in a specific way through illustrations that appeal to the head and heart. That's what we do as leaders all the time.
Mhm. I just go back to, isn't it nice that you and I find so much joy in interviewing somebody who writes and illustrates books? Because that's the power that they have when they're sitting in our classrooms, right? You just open it up. And when I asked him the question about, were you consciously doing, is there consciously that social change part? And he started to talk about the fact that, inclusivity is easy. I feel like just those words alone were really important. Being inclusive should not be difficult. And that's something that I feel like when you're looking, even when you're with somebody that you might have a completely different perspective from, we can sit down and look at something like a picture book and really come together just reading that. So yeah, this is going to go down as one of those moments that I'm just really happy that we had the opportunity to interview him. I have been a fan of his work for 20 years. So that's pretty fantastic. So I'm glad we got to experience this, although I know that while we're on the road, and 5 years down the road, you're going to be able to say, Loren Long asked me to read his book to him.
He did ask me specifically. Just want the audience to know. He said, Mike, would you read this? He didn't say Peter, he said Mike. And so, yeah. And just you have to close with the yellow bus and the idea of bringing joy. They filled her with great joy, no matter where she was at the progression of her journey as a school bus. And you think of this profession, and we have teachers that are in the job for 30 to 40 years, and they progress over time. And how do we support them in finding joy where they're at in their careers, and leaders and where they're at in their careers, and our students where they are in the progression through school? It's beautiful.
Well, look at you. You've been in education for over 40 years. You still find a lot of
that out to our audience.
Yeah, no, I just for over 40 years. Did you notice I kind of said over? No, but you find a lot of joy in education. You find a lot of joy in what you're doing. Throughout, whether you're a teacher or a building leader or a district leader, whether you're with WASA now, you're writing books and we're facilitating workshops. You've been in education for as long as the people you've mentioned, and yet you still find a lot of joy in what you're doing, and that's pretty amazing. I think that's one of the reasons why we connect to the book. But I just want to thank everybody for listening. If you ever wondered what it sounds like when Peter DeWitt gets tongue-tied, just re-listen to this podcast, because I'm sure that it's come up. But I really appreciate the fact that Loren Long said yes to allowing us to interview him. I hope that all of you who are listening have those people that you admire so much that you get excited to be able to talk to them, because that was the interview that we just had.
It was. Thank you for joining us. And as always, give us feedback.